For former mobile prep stars return to high school bowling. The 2022 Reese's Senior Bowl features 4 players from mobile area high schools, but their hometown didn't get LSU defensive tackle Neil Farrell Jr., Tennessee wide receiver Velus Jones Jr., Auburn cornerback Roger Mccreary and South Alabama wide receiver Jalen Talbot invited to the Port City's annual All-Star Game. "We don't want to force local guys into the game," said Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl's executive director. "We want them to earn it. This is a draft event now. We owe it to the NFL to bring the very best players to the game, and this year, 4 local guys are more than deserving of that. So Jalen Talbot, Velus Jones, Neil Farrell and Roger Mccreary, that's 4 really good local players. More Senior Bowl times quarterback pecking order really tight heading into game week. Times former Saraland star in home stretch of achieving NFL dream. Times Detroit Lions, New York Jets will serve as coaching staffs. I think it speaks to the football heritage and lineage in our community and what football means down here, so it's really going to be awesome to have those guys here." As high school standouts, Farrell played for Murphy, Jones for Saraland, Mccreary for Williamson and Tolbert for McGill-Tulane. When the college football season opened, the local prospect outlook for the Senior Bowl wasn't as rosy as it turned out, but Jones and Farrell blossomed in their final college campaigns. "Both of them played their way into the game," Nagy said. "If you had asked me over the summer about both of these guys, they wouldn't have had invites. They took advantage of 2021 and they earned their way in." Once high school rivals, the 4 players will become teammates for February 5th Senior Bowl as members of the American team, which will be directed by the Detroit Lions coaching staff. On Monday, Nagy provided a scouting report for each local prospect as the players approach a milepost on the way to the NFL draft, which is scheduled for April 28th to 30th. Murphy defensive tackle Neil Farrell Jr. makes a tackle against Foley on October 8, 2015, at Spartans Stadium in Mobile. Mike Kittrell, preps@all.com. Neil Farrell Jr. helped LSU win the CFP National Championship for the 2019 season when he had 46 tackles, 7 tackles for loss and 3 sacks in 15 games for the undefeated Tigers. The shortened and scrambled 2020 season didn't go as well, with 24 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss and 1 sack in 8 games for Farrell. Farrell re-established himself this season with 45 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks in 12 games, and Pro Football Focus chose him as an All-American. Jim Nagy on Neil Farrell Jr. "COVID really hit the bigger guys harder last year than the skill players, Neil being one of them. I think he was on the fence a little bit last August whether to play or not play, and then he came back, and conditioning was an issue, stamina was an issue. Pad leveled when you get gassed and you're an interior defensive lineman and you're playing high, that's not a good body position to be in. He came back and had by far his best year. It's really hard to move inside. I think the biggest thing for Neil now, everyone sees Neil as a guy that can really help on first and second down as a runs down player. Now can he come down here in one-on-one pass rush and show a little pass rush? And if he can, then you're in a different category. If you go from a 2-down player to a 3-down player, that's where you can really help yourself." Saraland wide receiver Velus Jones Jr. returns a kickoff against Spanish Fort on September 18, 2015, at Spartans Stadium in Saraland.Scott Donaldson, world.com. Velus Jones Jr. had a redshirt year followed by 3 seasons at Southern Cal before completing his college career with 2 seasons at Tennessee. Jones had his best season as a receiver with 62 receptions for 807 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2021. At USC and Tennessee, Jones returned kickoffs, and his 2,973 yards rank 14th in NCAA FBS history. This season, Jones tried returning punts, too, posted the nation's second-best average and was the SECCO Special Teams Player of the Year. Jim Nagy on Velus Jones Jr. "Velus this year, as both a returner and a receiver, took it to a different level. Here's what the league's looking for right now. I don't even want to bring up Deebo's name in it, but we saw what a weapon Deebo can be, and that's because he's big and strong with the ball in his hands and aggressive, and Velus has some of that. Deebo might be the best receiver in the league right now, so I'm not putting him in that category, but in terms of what the league is looking for, playmakers, guys that are aggressive and strong with the ball in their hands, can make things happen, that's Velus. So there's a lot of support in the league for Velus, not just for us. Leaguewide has taken a huge jump on everyone's board this year. Probably was a fringe draftable guy going into the year, and now has solidly draftable, safely draftable like we like to say. He's going to bring a lot. He's going to do a lot of return stuff down here. I wouldn't be shocked if the Detroit Lions use him in the backfield some and let him showcase some of that because I think he has some of that personally. Williamson defensive back Roger Mccreary intercepts a pass against Mobile Christian on November 2, 2017, at Spartans Stadium in Mobile. Scott Donaldson, world.com. A 2-year starter at Auburn, Roger Mccreary earned All-Sec recognition and was selected as a first-team All-American by the Associated Press this season. In his final season at At Auburn, Mccreary reached a career high with 49 tackles, including his first sack, intercepted 2 passes and broke up 14 passes. Jim Nagy on Roger Mccreary: when you watch his tape, you see the chip on the shoulder. Even without knowing his background, he competes like a guy who hasn't been told he was the greatest thing since sliced bread coming out. Feisty guy, not the biggest guy, not the longest guy. I think his arm length will probably get picked apart in this process a little bit. I think teams want to see how he's going to match up vertically, which is true top-end speed down the field. I think that's something during Senior Bowl week that teams are going to be looking at. But has a really good cover player. If the bottom line is, like we used to say in scouting groups, can he stick with people? Roger Mccreary can stick with people. He's really competitive. You saw in the Iron Bowl, when he's in position to make a play, he can make a play. If you can turn the ball over, that's a really key thing. And Roger's a really feisty, competitive cover player. It's been really cool to kind of see a guy that everyone said was a 3-star guy kind of emerge to now 4 years later has in the top 50 mix probably, and I wouldn't rule out the first round. The cornerback position right now is really unsettled. If you talk to a bunch of teams, kind of like the quarterback group, you're going to get a lot of different answers to who those top 2 or 3 cornerbacks are, and Roger's definitely in that mix. McGill wide receiver Jalen Talbot catches a touchdown pass against Spanish Fort on August 19, 2016, at Lipscomb Field in Mobile. Mike Kittrell preps at all.com. A 1,000-yard receiver for South Alabama in 2020, Jalen Tolbert returned for the 2021 season and had an even better showing. Tolbert caught 82 passes for 1,474 yards and 8 touchdowns on his way to winning the Sun Belt Conference Offensive Player of the Year award. Jim Nagy on Jalen Tolbert: Jalen had a phenomenal career, and you can go back to McGill, but it's been really fun watching his growth as a player. If you go back 13 months ago, there were agents who were circling Jalen Tolbert to get him to go in last year's draft. I think Jalen made a really smart decision to come back. I think part of that is the pitch from Kane Womack and those guys that they were going to move him around a bunch. I think Major Applewhite moved Jalen around a lot this year like they did the year before with Devonta Smith up at Alabama, and it showed the teams he could do that. You know, it's one thing when you see a guy locked into one certain spot in college, and it's always in the back of your mind, why aren't they moving this guy around? Is it a learning thing? What is it? Well, now, has done everything, so that box is checked. From a skill set standpoint, anyone who's watched him can see has a good route runner, has really good in competitive ball situations, has good after the catch. I think he's more explosive than people give him credit for. I think he's going to run better than people give him credit for. I think that might be the last box to check to pro day, what that time ends up being. But I know on the football field, he certainly plays fast. I think Jalen right now is probably a fringe top 100 guy, that 3rd, 4th round, and I think this week and through the process will determine where that ends up. But regardless of where he goes, I think Jalen's going to play in the league for a long time. For more of all.com's coverage of the NFL, go to our NFL page. Mark Anabanet is a sports reporter for Alabama Media Group. Follow him on Twitter at @AMarkG1.